Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Steve, and today this is my very first YouTube video. And today we're going to be setting up a Terraform project that is going to spin up EC2 instances in AWS. I'm making a series of videos because I'm teaching myself Kubernetes, and I'm currently already certified as a Kubernetes application developer. I passed the CKAD exam, and currently I'm working on the CKA exam, Certified Kubernetes Administrator. So I wanted to make YouTube videos so I could document my learning journey and go back and refer to these videos for in the future for when I want to go back and see what I did or see how I have improved over time. So these videos are more for my own learning, as well as if anybody else wants to review them and give me pointers or tips, those are more than welcome. But yeah, anyway. So the first thing we're going to be doing is I'll kind of explain a little bit of my background, and then we're going to go through our current setup with our Terraform project to spin up the EC2 resources and all the rest of the resources in AWS. And then we're going to go ahead and execute the Terraform file, the Terraform project, and spin up the resources and verify that they're spin up and working. And then we're going to finish the video by destroying the resources. And that's a technical term for Terraform. So we're basically going to spin them up, verify that they're spun up, and then spun down. So in the future, I'm going to make more videos about building off of this same Terraform project. So ultimately what I want to do when talking about the CKA certification exam is I want to be able to spin up my own cluster using Terraform. I'm going to manually set up a cluster using various methods, and then this is kind of my practice repo. So I'm going to practice everything that I need to practice for the CKA exam, and I'm just recording it so again I can learn from it, and anybody else who wants to give me tips or tricks or watch the videos and learn from it as well can get more familiar with it. So I will just give a little bit of background. I currently have 5 years of experience as a software engineer. I got into the industry through a boot camp. I am not a computer science major, but I have made a successful transition into the industry. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. Feel free to reach out. It's definitely difficult, but if you know, I would say that the most important thing is learning how to learn new technologies. Everything is moving so quickly right now, especially with AI and all the new technologies coming out. Everything is constantly changing. So being able to keep up and target specific technologies where things are going in the future is definitely key, and just learning how to learn things helps with breaking into the industry. I am choosing the Kubernetes CKA exam because I think where AI is going, a lot of AI resources run off Kubernetes, and I think down the road I use, and I'll get into this a little bit more throughout the video, but I use Cursor as a IDE, and I can see where AI is kind of going as far as coding. So AI is pretty good at coding, especially when used as a tool by a software engineer. It's pretty definitely very useful in a tool that allows you to be 3 to 4 times more productive just writing code. Even though you still need to know what to do. You still need to know coding. You still need to know how things are supposed to be built. But you can tell Cursor to go, hey, build me this page, and then you definitely need to verify it and go check the code. But it helps a lot with trivial tasks, and you'll get the picture if you start using it. So I think the most important thing I want to focus on now is just learning the DevOps and going towards, again, this Kubernetes certification. I think as I said before, a lot of the resources, AI resources, are based on or ran off of Kubernetes. So transitioning over into DevOps / Kubernetes administration, I think, is a safe bet for now, especially into the future as this technology is getting more and more popular. I've been learning Kubernetes through using Code Cloud. I highly recommend Code Cloud. Again, I started with the KCSA, or that very first exam, kind of a top level exam. And then I got the CKAD exam, so Certified Kubernetes Application Developer. very difficult exam. I failed the first time, but I was able to pass the second time, and I kind of know what to expect now for the CKA. And luckily, once you've done the CKAD exam, the CKA does have some new concepts in there, but it's pretty similar to the CKAD exam and vice versa. So once you've done one of them, you kind of know what to expect and how to prepare for the other one. And then eventually I'm going to go for the CKS exam as well, and then get the quote-unquote Kubestronaut certification, and then go for a certified Kubernetes administrator position somewhere. So ultimately, this video is going to be me, again, using this Terraform file that I've built, and we'll go ahead and talk about that. So I made a quick Terraform file, and again, this is not a Terraform video, so we won't go into too many details about Terraform, although that's a good idea for me to make a video about in the future. There are tons and tons of videos on both Terraform and Kubernetes on YouTube and on all the cloud, all the other platforms as well. So I'm going to probably eventually do that, but for now, that's how I learn, just going to these other videos and reading documentation and stuff. And I will say the Terraform documentation is very good. So if you don't know Terraform or you're looking to learn Terraform, definitely reading the documentation is something that's important, as well as watching videos and practicing. So any reference or any questions you have that come up during the process, the first go-to would be to use the Terraform documentation to look up and see what things are and how they're supposed to be done, etc. So my current setup, again, is Cursor. So I have a subscription for Cursor, which I think is $20 a month. Definitely worth it. I use it on all my personal projects, which, I like to have personal projects, and I think of a good idea and I start working on it, or want to practice a technology. Using Cursor is definitely something that has helped with, and being able to build them out quickly, get MVPs out there. One thing I will say about Cursor is that I've learned that vibe coding is a thing right now, and if people are vibe coding, especially if they're not software developers or they don't know the code, they just tell Cursor or tell whatever technology they're using that, hey, I want this application and here's what it should do. The AI coding functionality, the AI coding programs are good at spinning up foundations of projects, but once you get into more complex projects, they actually can kind of be a hindrance, and that all depends obviously on how you prompt and what building blocks, how you're breaking down your project into different building blocks, which is kind of the key as far as what I've learned with using AI to code. So if you're using Cursor to spin up, various components or projects, breaking them down into the subcomponents is very important when you want the project to come together as a whole and not have many errors. If you don't do that, you'll start getting errors at a certain point in your project because it becomes too complicated, and then it'll kind of be like whack-a-mole trying to fix the errors, and especially using Cursor to fix the errors that Cursor created. I've experienced a project where I just was exploring how good Cursor could spin up a project that I told it to, and how it could build it out, and it did pretty well, but once it got to a certain point, it was almost too complicated for Cursor, and I had to go back and manually do a lot of coding and do some refactoring to get the project to work. And it was just, so that's a pitfall that definitely needs to be talked about. So yeah, with that being said, we'll go ahead and talk about the current project. Basically, I'm going to spin up so let's back up a little bit. So Kubernetes, I'm going to be practicing administering Kubernetes on an EC2 cluster, not using EKS. So EKS is kind of the managed Kubernetes service from AWS, but I'm actually going to spin it up. spin up EC2 instances in AWS and manually set up the cluster. And this is just for practice because I want to get familiar to how Kubernetes works, how to spin things up, how to set up clusters and resolve problems that come up both during that process and during the cluster while it's up online. So what I've done here is, again, if you're not familiar with Terraform, it's a way to interact with the cloud platforms. There's a lot of additional functionality that Terraform offers, but for the purposes of this project, basically it's going to replace me having to go into AWS and create, an EC2 instance manually, set everything up. Terraform offers you, it's called infrastructure as code. So instead of doing that, and instead of going into the AWS console and manually setting things up, making sure everything is communicating properly, what you can do, and this is a lot easier, is you can set up the Terraform project to configure it with AWS, and then you can tell it what resources you want, and then you can spin up the resources using the Terraform project, and it will go under the hood behind the scenes and spin up all the resources in this case AWS, because that's what we're using in the project. But you could just as well do it in Azure or Google Cloud, and that's kind of what Terraform is used for, and that's one of the, obviously the main feature of Terraform is ability to interact with various cloud and other resources. It's pretty cool. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and talk about this project more. So again, I've configured the AWS provider in the main.tf file. So I have a main.tf file, which is basically just the main Terraform file that I'm using to declare the resources. And Terraform is an infrastructure as code tool, so you can again declare the infrastructure you want as code, just like it sounds. So that's what we're doing here. And then so we set up, configure it with AWS. We've set up the provider location, so we set it up in US East 1. That's one of AWS's locations or regions. And for the AWS AMI, so the image that we're going to use on the EC2 instance, I'm just using a standard, Ubuntu image. And then we have the AWS VPC, AWS subnet. So we're using the default VPC and subnet here. And one thing to mention is that you'll see these are all called blocks. So each individual block kind of represents something in Terraform. So you'll see these data blocks versus resource blocks. So these data blocks basically are items in the cloud in AWS, for instance, that are not managed by your particular Terraform project. So these already exist in your account. So when you declare a data block, that it's just going to get that information from that particular resource. So because these are already existing, we're just going to pull the information from them. We're not spinning these up and spinning these down with this particular Terraform project. So you can actually take over control of these resources using Terraform. Say if you have an existing EC2 instance that you want to pull into being managed by your Terraform project, you can do that. But that's outside the scope of this video. But yeah, so that's what the data blocks are. These resource blocks are the things that we're actually creating. So all these resources will get spun up and spun down by us in this project. So we have a security group called main. So this is like you're declaring the resource, declaring the type. So this is specific to Terraform. And then you're giving it, this is the name that you provide it. So if I wanted to name this something else, I could. But you could refer to these security groups or the resources that you declare in other blocks of the project, so you can kind of build things and make them connect together. So here we've set up SSH port 80, SSH port 22, HTTP port 80, HTTPS port 443. And then we've given it some tags, so we can, it'll create tags in the resource for that resource in AWS. So we're spinning up, creating a key pair to be able to SSH into our instance. And then we're actually creating the instance here. So this is the instance block, and as you can see, we're giving it the image that we've declared in the data block above. We're telling it what type, and this is T2 micro, which is a free tier, but this is not very good for Kubernetes. It's not big enough. So we're just going to spin this up with a T2 micro for now. And then down the road, maybe in the future videos, we're going to use different instance type. So that way we can have the proper resources we need for our Kubernetes cluster. And we have the subnet, VPC, key name. And then for this user data, this block basically this is gonna run on the server once it's done spinning up, and we'll be able to confirm that everything worked and is good to go by SSHing into the server that we spun up, and we'll print out this file. We'll be able to see this message, and that'll kind of confirm that everything worked as expected. You can get pretty complicated with these user data scripts. There's many ways of running things on your EC2 instance after it's been spun up. But for now, we're just going to use this. So for these output blocks, these actually grab the values of the resources that were created. So for instance, we're saving the public IP of the instance that we created. So we can grab that again by using the name AWS instance, and we named it Kubernetes KAS instance. So if we go up here, KAS instance, and same with the instance ID. So we're grabbing the public IP and the ID from the instance. And not to go into too many details about how Terraform works, but Terraform maintains a state of your project. So it spins up the resources, maintains the state of those resources, and then once you add, edit, or remove any of the resources, it will update the state accordingly. And for now, we just have a local state on my laptop, because that's all we need. If you're working with a team, you can keep the state remote so everybody can kind of share the same state. You're not overwriting things and don't get all mixed up. So we'll start with the Terraform workflow. So we've already created our Terraform file with all the resources we want. So now we're going to run the Terraform workflow, which is Terraform init. So this will go and initialize the backend. You can see what it's doing here. Initializing all the provider plugins. So this is initializing all the plugins for AWS, because that's what we're using as our provider. And then we're going to go ahead and do Terraform plan. So this is just what it sounds like. Terraform's going to come up with a plan to provision our resources. So as you can see, it's going to end up creating 3 resources with this file, changing 0 and destroying 0. And then the outputs are going to be the instance ID and the public IP. So just like we declared here. So we're going to run t apply. Sorry, I said t. It should be Terraform. Usually I alias this command so I can just type t instead of typing out Terraform every time. So write Terraform apply. It's going to apply everything, and then it's going to have you confirm that you want to apply, and you type yes. So again, it spits out the plan. And if you scroll up, you can kind of see all the stuff that it's going to, all the resources it's going to provision, but we'll say yes. And before that, we'll go over here. So I ran this. Okay. So we can see that this instance is terminated. So I had ran this Terraform file before I started this video, just to make sure everything was good to go. And I spun it down and destroyed everything as well, so we can see this terminated instance. But there's no running instances right now. So once we hit yes, we'll be able to go into this console. And once this is done, see it's creating everything. Key pair, security group, instance. So it's creating an instance. And it takes a couple minutes to spin up. All right, so that was quick. So everything was successful. We can see that we have the instance ID returned as an output from our Terraform execution. And then we have the public IP of the instance. So once we refresh here, we should see that there will be another instance that is currently running. And here we go. It's a currently running instance. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And then we're going to connect to it Actually, I'll just click on this. So we'll connect to this instance, and then we're going to go ahead and print out this message just to confirm that everything ran and was proper. Alright, so we're currently SSH'd into the machine. Now we're going to view this file. And here we go. So that's confirmation that everything is spun up and that the user data script ran and that everything is good to go. Now down the road, you may be able to see the utility in this. So once we spin these things up, for a Kubernetes cluster especially, we're going to have to install a bunch of stuff. So we could install a bunch of the required programs here in this user data script for our Kubernetes cluster, and then that's how we're going to spin it up, and then it'll make it easier every time we want to spin up and spin down the cluster. We'll just have to wait for everything to install, but we won't have to do it manually. And that's kind of the power of Terraform, is you can set things up like that. Eventually we could create an AWS AMI, an image with all those things pre-installed, so that way every time we want to spin up an EC2 instance, we could just use that pre-configured image without having to install everything, and it'll be awesome. We'll be able to get right to our Kubernetes cluster administration stuff. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm done now. And this is another powerful thing with Kubernetes, or with Terraform, sorry, is that I'm done practicing for the day or doing whatever I'm doing in the cloud. And I want to get rid of these resources, because these resources incur money, incur charges. So I don't want to be charged when I'm not working on anything. So we can actually spin down these resources now and destroy them and not be charged. So, which comes in handy if you have resources that are pretty expensive. So for instance, I believe AWS SFTP servers cost 30 cents an hour. So if I was practicing with the SFTP server or something, and I don't want to leave that up running, because I think it's over $200 a month to leave that on full time. So obviously if I was practicing with that, I want to spin it up with Terraform, and then when I'm done, spin it down. So we're going to go ahead and do that now by using the Terraform destroy command, which is pretty simple. So we'll do Terraform destroy. So this will spit out another plan of what it's going to do. So it'll go and look at all the resources and come up with a plan to get rid of them, and you'll see the 3 resources that we created earlier are going to be destroyed. So we're not adding anything else, we're not modifying anything, we are getting rid of all the things that we created. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll confirm that this EC2 instance should go into the terminated state again, just like the other one. So we confirmed, we typed in yes. Now it's going to go behind the scenes and get rid of all the resources that we created. And Terraform is pretty smart to, when it spins up and spins down resources, it knows the dependencies. So it'll determine the dependencies under the hood, and then spin up the resources in the proper order. But if you wanted to, you can also tell it to, you can also give it explicit dependencies as well inside of the block. Inside of the resource block for that particular resource. For some resources you can do that. So for now, we're going to go here. As you can see, it says shutting down. So it's in the process of shutting down this instance. And there's a lot of functionality that I didn't talk about with Terraform that's super cool. So I would highly encourage you to look at it if you're not familiar with it yet. I have used it in a professional setting where basically our team took a project that was not managed by Terraform and completely terraformized it, I call it, and it was pretty cool. All right, so now you can see that our 3 resources were destroyed. So we should now be able to go into the EC2 console and see that our instance has been terminated. Yep, see, there we go. Both of them are terminated, and that's pretty much it. So this is kind of the start of the series that I want to create for myself and you if you want to follow it. I appreciate you watching to this point, but basically what I'm going to do from here is build off of this project, and eventually we're going to have a Terraform project that spins up a Kubernetes cluster on the fly as much as possible. And then I'm going to set up CI/CD. I'll create a project, front end, back end database project, containerize those applications, and then use it for CI/CD pipelines for Kubernetes. And that's kind of where I'm going. So thank you for watching, and let me know if you have any tips or tricks. But otherwise, thank you.